If you ask an average producer, how many samples do you use to make a techno kick drum? Most probably you will hear you need at least 3 different sounds. For a producer that is just starting out, this might sound off-putting. Sounds layering and working with many individual samples seems complex and tiresome. If you are such a person, then with this easy to follow tutorial I got you covered, because this kick sound you will learn making today has been made with just a single sample. Sounds so much simpler, right? By the way, all the sounds you have heard so far are a part of my upcoming hard/industrial techno sample and serum preset pack, inspired mainly by artists like KRTM, Raxele or Ayarkana. It will have everything you need to level up your hard techno productions. Sign up to my waiting list, download a demo version of the pack and get a discount to buy the full product once it's released. If our kick has to be made out of a single sample, then it's good to pick something that already sounds full. So I'm not a huge fan of Vengeance sample packs. Most of their kick drums, especially from the clubby category, are already punchy and have some pleasant high end, along with a juicy low end. So if the sample sounds somewhat like this, we are good to go. Let's create a simple pattern. And we will quickly discover that in between the kick drums there is an empty space that has to be filled with at least low frequencies. Depending on how you fill that empty space, your kick drum and your track in general will sound either professional or amateur. One of the simplest ways to fill that empty space would be to duplicate our sample into another pad in the drum rack. If we enhance our pattern by adding notes for that duplicated kick drum, as of now, we simply double the tempo. So, what to do? If I trim the duplicated kick drum to remove its beginning, the whole thing still sounds unnatural. At first, let's reverse the second kick sound. To make sure this kick drum stops playing once the MIDI note in the clip ends, because we wouldn't want to have the duplicated kick drum be inaudible once the main kick starts to play, in simpler we will switch the playback mode to gate. The rhythm will become more interesting if our reversed kick drum had a different pitch than the main kick sound. By pitching the reversed kick down, I will fill the beat with more low frequencies. The warping feature that keeps the sample lengths the same regardless of its pitch can be either turned on or left untouched. There are 2 ways to adjust the current rhythm. We can trim the reversed sample from the left, and this will make the bassline less monotonic. If you want to get rid of these weird clicks after trimming the sample, make use of both fade in and fade out knobs. The second way to alter the rhythm is to go to the MIDI clip and adjust the starting point for the reversed kick. If I make the reversed kick drum start playing too late, I risk having an empty beat once again. On the other hand, if I make the reversed kick play too early, I will make the low frequencies coming from both kick samples interfere, and I will start losing the low end. It will give me an empty sound for yet another time. This is tricky because once I do that, on the surface it seems as if nothing wrong is happening. To show you where the problem is, I will isolate the low end with a filter on the master channel. Now let's do the same thing and make the reversed kick drum play too early. The problems begin when the low end becomes unstable, and that's something you need to pay attention to. Once the rhythm is adjusted well, the next step towards a smooth bass is to use a low pass filter on the reversed kick drum. We don't need that noise in the reversed sound, we can hear without any filtering. Let's think of how to add more crunch and crispiness to the sound, since we need it to make the kick sound hard and rich in the context of all other instruments we add later. If I simply add some distortion in the whole group, I will make the sound flat and I will lose all the dynamics once I add quite a lot of drive. That is because distortion effects, similarly as limiters or compressors, can alter the dynamics of the sound once pushed hard. On the other hand, if I reduce the amount of distortion, the sound won't change by a lot and we will end up with no power. So, to get both crispiness and dynamics, we should combine two separate sounds, one with dynamics and one with crunch. I will start applying parallel processing to the kick sound, but before that let me advertise myself quickly and just say that if you wish to have other sound design or music production subjects explained in such an easy and practical way, consider going onto my website to learn more about my private music production lessons. Free consultations are available as well. Using an audio effect track, I can process the same sound in two different ways and combine them later into a single output. The first chain will give us the dynamic sound. Actually, we don't have to add anything in that chain since our current kick already sounds dynamic. We will leave this chain untouched and move on to the second one where I will add effects that make the kick crispy. What kind of effects should be used now? Definitely it should be the distortion, but even among stock Ableton effects, there are quite a lot of distortion effects available. If our goal is to just make the kick crispy without adding obnoxious amounts of noise and without making the sound unnatural, I recommend most trying out the amp, pedal or saturator. From third-party plugins you can try out the SGA1566 saturator, Audio Assault Head Crusher 3 or Soundtoys Decapitator if you have money, and obviously the Isotope Trash 2. All these effects can be chained together and that will give a huge control over the sound. And since it's parallel processing, you don't have to worry about the dynamics. In my project I will use at first the pedal from Ableton. Once I drop it, I start by choosing an appropriate distortion style. The overdrive mode gives me a warm crunch that I like. By increasing the gain knob, I add some more of that crunch. Below we have an equalizer section. Here I will only add some more high-end. Because I will equalize properly this sound soon, I won't spend much time in that section. I also don't bother with boosting the low end with the sub switch. During equalization I will immediately remove the low end anyways. The next effect should bring me even more crunch and I want to make the kick brighter. Especially the beginning of the kick should be bright. I know from experience that the amp will do just that. Once I use it, I start browsing for the brightest distortion style. And most of the times it's the clean one that gives the brightest sound. The second most important parameter to set is the gain, that tells the amount of distortion added. The next section is the equalizer. With certain distortion styles and large amount of drive added, it can act more as a way to shape the distortion instead of as an equalizer. Our current settings are moderate, so we can expect the bass, middle and treble knobs to work as intended. I will tweak these knobs and make the kick sound darker. The volume knob, depending on the distortion style, can also shape the distortion itself, but here it will only adjust the output volume. At last, I will blend this effect by decreasing the dry-wet control. It's time to equalize this crunchy layer. Definitely we have to remove the low end because the low frequencies are already present in our tri-chain. So here is a high pass filter that I will use. A large steep ensures there won't be any low end present. Besides just removing the low end, there are a few more things we should do. It's time for a more precise equalization. Because I already cut the low end, I can add the dry kick sound back, because an equalization should be always done in the context of other instruments or sounds. The first thing would be to get rid of the mud that usually sits in the frequency range from around 200 to 350 Hz. A 1 kHz and around is the frequency area that helps making the bass or kick sound more crispy. If you find the kick sound too crispy, and that can happen too after distortion, make another cut there. Sometimes there can be an unpleasant, kinda low-pitched hiss present in the sound. To get rid of that, cut the frequency area from 2 to 3 kHz. The last two filters will precisely reduce the amount of the highest frequencies, making the kick sound more muffled. At last, I adjust the volume of that crispy layer in relation to the dry sound. From now on, what we will do is processing both sounds outside of the parallel processing. Since our kick has both low, mid and high frequencies, it's no wonder that the best way to control the dynamics of our kick to make it more groovy and powerful is to use a multiband compression. And to be more precise, the best way to make that kick more punchy and powerful is to compress the mid frequencies of it. I have a whole in-depth tutorial on how to make various kick drums sound powerful by using multiband compression, so if you want to learn more, please watch that video as well. Here I will just turn on and off each individual compressor that is already adjusted to show you how does the sound change. And I will begin with the mid-frequencies compressor that is the most important. It both adds more attack to the kick and makes the tail of the kick drum more prominent. The low frequencies are slightly flattened to make the low end more solid and glued. This is naturally done inside of the bottom compressor. At last, the high-end compressor is set up to bring more crunch up front. To sum up, the mid-frequencies compressor gives the kick punch and power, while low and high-end compressors rather help glue in the sound. If there is a need to make the kick sound even fuller, you can now add some more distortion in the group processing. It will also help glue in the sound better. It's important whether you put that extra distortion before or after the multiband compressor. If I use distortion before the compressor, I might get more subtle results, but in return, I will keep the punchy sound. Before the multiband dynamics, I do have an isotope Trash 2 loaded, where I use only its wave shaper module to distort the kick. The only thing I'm doing here is I'm choosing the right distortion algorithm and fine-tuning it with these two faders and switches. I have set this plugin up to make the kick drum warmer. Now if I would like to set this plugin in a different way to make the kick trashy, I could pick a different wave shaper curve. The kick is more mangled now, but it's still relatively punchy, because that distortion is added before the multiband compression. If I move now the trash to be after that compressor, I might get more interesting sound, but the punch is lost. That's something to keep in mind definitely. If I want to change the sound in a more aggressive way, I should use the distortion after the multiband compression. Of course, I will also have to make sure I don't use too much of that distortion to not lose the punch and attack. That is why I'm using here a sound noise decapitator. Something great for just saturation without trashing the sound. At first I have to pick an appropriate distortion style, so I set the drive a bit too high and use the switch in the bottom. Once the style is chosen, I adjust the amount of drive more precisely. Similarly as in the amp effect from Ableton, I can use now the middle section to alter the amount of low and high frequencies with low cut and high cut respectively. And that's the kick sound after extra distortion and volume compensation that will give us a better insight on what does the decapitator do. The last effect in the chain is the equalizer, where I do all the precise adjustments. I begin with a steep high-pass filter that will cut all the inaudible frequencies. They often clutter the kick sound, and you might find that once you use such a filter, the kick becomes more clean and punchy. A second thing that I do often is I boost slightly the sub-frequencies of the kick to make it deeper. Further equalization might include controlling the amount of mud once again in the frequency region of around 200 Hz. If there is a need to get rid of that hissy hollow sound, I again try to cut the area around 2 kHz. And now I will A/B the whole equalizer, because the change in the sound is quite large.